Okay, go ahead, Ollie.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our instruction work group meeting. I'm going to call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. Happy Pride, happy June. We have two major areas of focus this evening. So tonight we'll get an update on our multilingual programming. And we will also get an update from the Office of Youth Reengagement. Before I turn it over to our administration to talk about both of those areas, we are going to hear from one person who is registered for public comment, and we will pass minute meetings after that.
Thanks, Ollie. Our in-person speaker is Chandra Blofeld. Chandra Blofeld. Welcome to come up here to this chair.
Which one?
This one right here in front. Yeah, so everyone can see you.
So I have a few questions first off. There's many rumors that I'm not happy about at all. Holtzman Learning Center, what is the long-term plan for Holtzman? What is the agenda for Holtzman?
We can't answer back.
Oh, you can't answer back?
Yeah, so public comment is not an interactive conversation between the community and the board due to the way
Okay,
that
well, I'm just gonna say the fact that I think your plan going forward, from what I've heard, totally bites. I think that you are setting these children, not only mine, but several in that building, for disaster. Those children, yeah, go ahead and just cancel that, turn it off. Can you? I'm sorry about that. But you are setting these children up for disaster. These children are not equipped for a classroom setting. A lot of these children can't handle sitting down in a classroom and given a book to study. They'll throw it at you. A lot of these children go to school for 4 to 5 hours of not training, education, and then they have to go to another site. I heard EMCC is closing this year. I think that's another horrible decision. Some of the children that are at EMCC are some of the hardest educated children to be educated. I know 2 or 3 of them I can name, but I'm not gonna name because of security, because of confidentiality. But these children need Holtzman, and the staff at Holtzman need more staff, and they need more credit for what they do. These staff at Holtzman are godsend. I mean, they get hit, they get smacked, they get everything else, and they don't get anything for it. Why? Because they're there for those kinds of kids. Holtzman has kids that the regular schools don't want. That's why they're at Holtzman. I mean, I can't explain it enough. The average child that goes to well, okay, I can talk about one child in Pacific that I know very well. He could only go to Holtzman an hour a day because he was too attached to his mom. They have done excellent with that child right now. Just excellent. I mean, that child is thriving. That child goes to 4 or 5 hours a day and he does great. That school is set up in 2 different areas, one being academic kids and one being for project-based child, which is my child, which is a success, Zion Michael Blofeld. He has huge success out of Holtzman, thankfully to John Harmlink, which is out of CC, EMCC, he is retiring this year, and Tony Martinelli, which is a
I want to thank you for your public comment. We give everybody about 3 minutes. Do you want to take another couple seconds just to wrap up?
I'm not close to even done. I mean, I want to end, I guess, with the fact of I would really reconsider closing Holtzman and moving those kids to your regular schools, because those kids at Holtzman are just gonna destroy the regular schools. And I don't think it's a good fit for those kids need to be in the structure that they're in. The least restrictive structure that they're in. You put them more into restrictive structure, it's not gonna be good.
Thank you so much for your public comment. I am going to motion that the board pass our meeting minutes. So I move to approve the minutes from the instruction work group meeting dated May 5th, 2025.
Second. Vandermeer.
Thank you so much for the second, Board Member Vandermeulen. All those in favor, aye.
Aye, my online.
Thank you so much. That motion passes unanimously. All right, we will now dive into our first update. And I will turn it over to our superintendent, Dr. Joe Gothard. This is an update on multilingual programming.
Thank you, Chair Muldrow. Excited tonight to have our staff and our community present our English language learners and our programming to you in our area of multilingual learning. Cindy Green will introduce our presenters. I just do want to share with those listening, staff here and elsewhere have heard me say over the past several months that our ELL percentage and number of children in Madison who receive multilingual services is larger than 90% of school districts in the state of Wisconsin. It is not only a significant portion of our student enrollment, it's one that we're very proud of and a community that we do everything we can to both uplift language acquisition, culture, sense of belonging, and the kind of education we want for every child in our school community. So it gives me great pride and excitement to have this presentation for you. With that, I'll turn it over to Cindy to introduce our presenters.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gothard. Thank you so much, Chair Muldrow. Really appreciate it. Justin, would you mind sharing our slides? So good evening, everyone. Thank you again for the introduction. Next slide, please, Jesse. As always, we want to ground in our 3 strategic framework goals, ensuring that every child is on track to graduate college, career, community ready. The district and every school in it is a place where our children, staff, and families thrive. And goal 3, African American children excel in school. And a reminder, we have shared this often, but our district improvement plan goals by 2027, we will increase in the areas goals 1, 2, and 3, and then you can see our performance objectives on the right side. Tonight you will hear in both presentations how we are focusing on ensuring that we are realizing these goals and performance objectives. I also want to acknowledge that this is the last instruction work group for the 24-25 school year. I feel like I was just sitting here with Chair Muldrow in August saying, welcome to the 24-25 school year. And here we are at the end of the school year. Next slide, please. So before I turn it over to Leah Zepeda-Vaughn, who is our Director of Multilingual Programs and Services, I just wanted to acknowledge that while Leah is going to be doing the bulk of the presenting, this work is truly cross-functional and across many departments. It is not possible for us to have the work of serving and supporting our English learners live in one department. So it is with great respect that the work that happens behind the scenes with many departments is also acknowledged. And so with that, I will turn it over to Leah Zepeda-Vaughn.
Thank you. Good evening. Wanted to start off by reminding us last time we were together with this topic about our English learner programs. We gave a really high level update about where the district has been over the past decade or so with our English learner plan. Tonight, we are going to take a more nuanced approach and talk a little bit about current information, current data around our English learners enrollment, and highlight a few next steps for us as a district as we continue to talk about our language programming for our English learners. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. So we just want to highlight a bit reminder about what our responsibilities are as a district when we're talking about serving our English language learners. Our responsibilities as a district are to make sure that our students are developing not just English language proficiency, but also meeting the same challenging and rigorous academic grade level content standards as their peers. Next slide. So this year, this is a current data snapshot from our third Friday count. We can see that we have over 5,000, close to 5,300 English learners who are currently receiving services. We have another 1,400 students that are former English learners. And as Dr. Gothard mentioned, we are one of the largest enrolled districts in the state with our English learner population, with serving over 102 languages here in MMSD. Next slide. Another highlight for us as a district is to remember that we have one of the strongest bilingual bicultural state statutes in the country for bilingual education, which mandates bilingual program availability for any language when enrollment levels reach certain thresholds across the district. And these are taught that teachers have to be licensed in both core content and bilingual education. Next slide. So currently, when we're talking about our bilingual programs, we have 69 students who are participating in our Hmong bilingual program, K through 7th grade. And 43% of our current English learners across the district and our Spanish bilingual program. And over 4,500 students across the district participate in our dual language immersion programs in Spanish. Next slide. So we'll shift to talking a little bit about how we measure English development and academic proficiency, which are the two ways that we can monitor progress per ESSA. Next slide. And a reminder that Access for English Language Learners is developed by the LEADA Consortium, which is housed right here in Wisconsin. And it measures 4 language domains. So listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Those statistics or those kind of growth measures are set by the state, not by MMSD. And so for every student, they get an individualized plan in terms of how they need to move towards meeting that English language growth score. We also use Forward to measure their English language arts and math up through K8. 5th grade Forward. Next slide, please. This shows us over the past 4 years, we looked at this last time, how our students are doing, and you see a pretty consistent rate of growth. So for students who are in kindergarten through 5th grade, those students tend to meet their growth goals at a higher rate than our students who are in middle school, and then our students in 9th through 12th grade. What we did talk about last time is that it is easier to meet those goals when they are in their early years, and those targets students move very quickly through those growth targets. Once you get to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, it becomes more rigorous to meet that academic language and really put that together with core content. And so as students move up levels, it's a little bit harder to reclassify. Next slide, please. This is where our English language arts and math scores are. You'll notice that this is the most up-to-date information we have right now, and those scores haven't been released yet. We continue that trend where our former English learners outperform our current ELs and our district average in both English language arts and in math, and then similar to the national trends we see for English learners. Slide. This year, we have also been doing a lot of work, and as Cindy said, it's a cross-functional efforts with both curriculum instruction and with our department to make sure that across language programs, both in English and in our bilingual programs, that staff are receiving information and understanding best practices in language and literacy development and in immersion. We have the opportunity to work really closely in our department with our second language and bilingual resource teacher to really unpack the WIDA 2028 ELD standards, English language development standards, and really map those on to how students are doing with instruction across different core content. We also were really excited this year able to host the Hmong curriculum cross-district collaboration. We are part of a consortium with both Fresno, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and here at MMSD. So we were able to bring folks from across the country together to talk about bilingual curricula and really learn from one another and be able to support the work, as we have one of the only Hmong bilingual programs in the state of Wisconsin. And of course, developing curriculum for that is really important, and making sure that it is culturally relevant and really holds our students' hearts in mind of that we are teaching them in Hmong. And next slide. We continue to collaborate with HR around staffing. We know that our bilingual teachers are very important to making sure that we are making our goals, students' growth goals. It is one of those high needs areas, hard to fill positions, but we are continue to expand our partnership with our higher education partners for licensing opportunities. So we are lucky that grant that continues to offer tuition for staff members who are pursuing their bilingual license. We continue to work with Adjournment College through our partnership that we developed last year that offers tuition, and we offer tuition reimbursement for our staff. And you'll note that this year we have a budget ask in for an increase, able to provide more tuition reimbursement for our staff who are pursuing English as a second language or bilingual licenses. And we continue to work with HR around our international, because we know that having all of those positions is important. Next slide, please. So we're going to shift a little bit to talk about access for language programming across the district. And if you look at the next slide, you'll note that this is a 5-year change in where current English learners are across the district. So the darker orange red are sort of where there's a shift, the population has moved to other parts of the city, and the darker blue is where their population increases are. We can note this as well when we're thinking about where our services are needed. For example, every year we note there's bins and outs and what languages need support in different schools across the district, and then we provide changes in allocation based on those. Next slide, please. So given that information and kind of thinking more long-term, we want to make sure that we're providing programming in the spaces that are best aligned to where our students are at. We also want to think about our best practices in bilingual education. We know right now that the data show that dual language immersion programs are the most sound of bilingual education to our students who are English learners. And we currently would like to look to shifting our last 2 remaining developmental bilingual education programs to dual language immersion programs. We also want to make sure we have access for students. So thinking about what that transportation is like for our students across the district to be able to access bilingual programming, and then continue to review those demographic changes to think about what sort of long-term plans we can make for our multilingual. With that, I will pause here.
So Chair Muldrow, I will turn it back to you, and we are open.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I see Board Member Vandermeulen's hand.
2 questions. One is, how do we separate the reading from writing in individual scores in individuals who have learning difficulties or learning disabilities? Because oftentimes there could be an extreme strength in one and a extreme weakness in the other. Do we give them separate grades? Is it what grade? How does that work?
So when we're talking about our access testing for English learners, students with individualized education plans can qualify for the alternate access. So it's specifically designed for students with different needs so that they can access the test. And then it's the state then decides what growth goals they've met, and then at some point they might be able to transition to access for English learners.
And my second question, that's very good to know. My second question is, for a long time, and I don't know if it's the case anymore, you had to choose between English language and or receiving dual exceptionality or gifted education. Is that still the case?
No, so it should never have been the case, and we work very hard to make sure that our staff are aware of what their students' rights are. So you have the right to be both an English learner and a student who may need an individualized education plan, so you can have both services.
I'm so glad to hear that because, yeah, I'd heard that in the past and I'm going, didn't sound right.
Thank
I
you so much
appreciate-
for your questions, Board Member Vandermeulen. I see Board Member Mosner Feltham.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your presentation. Nice to see you. Can you talk a little bit about how you support non-bilingual teachers to support EL students in their classes?
So what is really great about that question is that we always know that being able to collaborate with your classroom teacher and your English as a language teacher or bilingual resource teacher in terms of planning, teaching and pushing into the classroom is important. Currently, that has actually been a really big focus this year in our professional learning, talking about our student belonging as part of the core and making sure that teachers have an opportunity to collaborate and co-plan. We're always looking for opportunities to be able to support our classroom learning about English language development and how to make those things part of their work.
Is that, so when you talk about like co-teaching and co-planning, that makes sense to me in a situation where you have like a BRS teacher and a non-ESL certified or non-bilingual teacher. Is that same model of co-planning and consultation and beyond classes that are supported in that way? Like, how does that look?
Yeah, so for instance, CNI has an English language development teacher leader who does consultations with staff. So she's out in buildings, she's working cross-functionally to make sure that people have access to that coaching. But I want to go back to the question you're asking about classroom teachers not be supported that.
Like, if you have a teacher who speaks one language and that language is English and they're teaching math, and you've got a BRS or a BRT who supports that math class, the co-teaching and co-planning, I get that. But then if you've got someone who doesn't have that, but you still have ELs in your class, how do they get the support that they need?
So it might not be that there's always like a grown-up in that space, but there are opportunities for those people to plan during planning time to be able to get that support. So different schools will structure those differently depending on like schedules, depending on number of sections and teachers, but there should be opportunity always for one of those specialists to be able to co-plan with the teacher.
Okay.
And I'll just add that it's very similar to one teacher, so in terms of that common planning time where it's being in a specific space. I think that works really well at K-8. I think at high school with a number of BRTs and BRTs by content area, they're in different planning. And then the last thing I'll just mention about the EL, if the board remembers during ESSA, we took advantage of purchasing for the first time English language development materials to support in classrooms, and we also purchased curricula to support newcomers as well, and it was this amazing opportunity with one-time funds being to have that, and so that's been part of the work that Leah mentioned in terms of our teacher leader that is really supporting, especially in classrooms that are not on what I would say the DLI. They still have.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you for your questions, Board Member Mosner Feltham. Board President Nichols.
Yes, thank you, Chair Muldrow. My question is, when I look at your program considerations and you talk about wanting to align Spanish language programming to reflect best practices in bilingual education, really moving DBE towards DLI. When you were here with us back in like February of 2024, you had mentioned something similar. So I guess I'm curious about what all does it take to actually execute and implement on the best practices if we still have remaining DBE programming that we want to make DLI?
Yeah, so I think that, sorry, I was looking for that slide. So I was thinking about part of that slide talked about reviewing our demographic trends and creating long-term plans, right?
Mhm.
And so we've noticed that there have been shifts in demographics. We want to think about where are those English learners who can be best supported by a shift?
Okay,
And if there's a shift that can happen, can we provide the most access for the most students, right? So we want to think about, that's one area.
Yeah.
Then we have to really think about the community engagement that we do around those sites that currently have those programs and talk about what these shifts in practices look like. And then it has to, ideally, it's a structured approach to implementation. So with our DLI programs that we started back in 2015, a bit earlier, we did this, kindergarten started first, right? Because we can't necessarily add English speakers right away who don't necessarily speak the target language and have them be successful. So it would kind of be a slow phased approach. So you'd be adding grade levels as you move up, and that's what we did in the past when we added them at the or when we phased out our DBE program.
Can I add one additional thing that I think is really important to the, that Leah showed
Yeah.
and the work that we've talked about in terms of understanding the growth that is, representative of the map and also the future growth that we're seeing. So with, potential considerations around a boundary review and some other enrollment strategy work, this, is being wrapped into that to make considerations versus this having, it happen on the side. And so when we were here a year ago, we did mention the idea, and there was a consideration of that phased approach maybe happening in the 24-25 school year, I had to think about what, or the 25-26 school year. And so there's been a little bit of, I don't want to say a pause, but there's been a little bit of a slower phased in approach so that we can think about it with some of these other large scale boundary review enrollment strategies that are happening as well. To just make sure we're thoughtful about where DLI program needs to be and how we think about some of the pieces Lee mentions in terms of access and transportation.
Mm. You may have said this earlier in your presentation, I may not have caught it, but how many DBE programs or sites do we currently have?
2.
That's what I thought.
And Stevens and Hoffman.
2 remain.
Okay. So I'm trying to follow with like the idea of demographic shifts and a slow phased in approach. I guess when I see 2, and I saw 2 like over a year ago, 2 doesn't seem like that many, but I might be saying that without understanding the complexities. So I guess I'm still not understanding.
So I'll add a little more and then Lee, please chime in. Complexities around, so DBE currently serves only Spanish speaking English learners, and their program design is very different from DLI. So a reminder for DLI, we have a lottery process that happens. You have a 50-50 model, both in terms of instruction. So the teachers, both a teacher that is a bilingual teacher and either a teacher that teaches the English side or ESL. So staffing is one piece that is different. The other piece is for DLI, we invite students that may be monolingual English speakers, may be former English learners, or may be English learners in other languages outside of Spanish as well. And so that also could increase growth into the program that right now is only serving a very small population. So the infrastructure, the staffing, the lottery timeline, lottery is February for the following year. And also just to ensure that families, both those that have the right and by law we need to offer it to, but families that are interested in this programming as an option for their students requires a little bit of consideration as well. But I'll let you add to just kind of why. So it's not quite as simple, but.
Right. Leah, I'm sorry.
No, it's.
I mean, what I heard you say is staffing,
Mhm.
current infrastructure, and then processes, which to me all seem like aspects of resource allocation. So I guess we're here a little over a year later. And this is not me trying to throw
Oh, yeah.
anybody under
No,
the
no,
bus,
no,
but we're
sure.
here a year later with the same recommendation that it's best practice to move DLI. We have 2 sites. And I guess I'm still not sure if we haven't moved forward because it's a resource allocation piece, or if they're, or as you were saying, Cindy, through the kind of the transitions over the last year, we're also now trying to include the demographic shifts and some of the, you know, including that in terms of boundary review and wanting to be as thoughtful as possible.
I think one other thing, so it's that we, it's our sites 21 dual language immersion programs for Spanish. I want to make sure I got that number right. So that would add 2 more, 23. I think it's also in question around how we want to continue to have DLI programming if we have the
Oh.
ability to also serve strand programs in that way, even with staffing, because that's adding 2 more. Space configuration or space considerations is another thing. But Leah, please chime in if I missed anything.
No, I do think that that demographic information is important. I think at the time that we talked with Laura last time too, we were seeing a huge influx in newcomers, right? And so being able to track that and figure out where have students gone, and knowing that at the time, some of those school sites we're talking about, really Hawthorne, for example, has a smaller population. Where is their best access for all the new arrivals that we got in the system? And then if we're talking about resource allocation, right, does it make sense to maybe offer access in other locations? Does it, you know, all of those pieces come together.
Okay.
I think that thinking about long-term boundary reach,
Okay,
something important.
okay, so is there a recommendation from you all on a timeline to do some of that analysis? I mean, I see the map. I know you spoke to the map, and I appreciate that. I don't exactly know, one, if there would be a timeline for recommendations on when you all might think that new DLI programming should be created. Or I guess what I'm wondering is, would we ever create another DBE? So we would not create another DBE, okay. Yeah, so is that timeline in your mind following kind of our analysis of boundary reviews, total enrollment, really thinking about different places in the city where some of our current programming is
Yeah,
located?
so I think, yes, I think we've mapped out draft timelines internally, and then we've had a transition of a new leader, so that was important. So we have some draft timelines, and now we're at a place west side and like the Hawthorne area, both of those areas have a lot of developments and growth happening. And so from where we are in terms of those both being the 2 feeder areas that we're prioritizing in this attendance boundary review, that work, I think, is critically important to where we move with the shifts of D.
Okay,
So the short answer is yes, that we see all of that sinking together
okay,
at this point, because we didn't know all of, I mean, we just didn't know what we know now a year ago. I mean, I don't know that that's the quickest answer, but the developments and everything that's been happening, we just didn't know. We didn't have that same information last year, and with that, it's thoughtful to kind of make transitions of whatever those might be at the same time.
okay. Well, I appreciate the thoughtfulness. I guess I also feel like when we are getting annual updates like this, and thank you for the update, by the way. And we're going back to what is best practice, then I guess my expectation would be that we're moving towards best practice. And if there's real challenges in being able to do that, letting us know, like, what are the major hindrances, in doing that, so that it doesn't feel like we're kind of looping on the same thing about these are the best practices, and yet the same current state exists.
I appreciate that. Dr. Guthrie, I saw you turn, I just didn't know if you wanted to chime in.
No, just, again, this Cindy's does talk. Development. Just the fact that we have DLI 21 sites in and of itself is a very challenging design.
Mm,
We have a lot of great resources, incredible teachers and students. And when they're spread thin, the capacity we're able to reach students is, I want to say compromised, but it's challenging. Everything from just the number of workforce you need to spread out on that many sites is hard. And then we have a program that we're really proud of, our Hmong, bilingual program that, again, we have one site and we have children from all over the city. Our Hmong families don't live only in the Lake Lieutenant's area.
yeah,
So transportation, location, those are all realities that we're facing right now.
mhm,
And, as Cindy's remarking about being thoughtful, those are the kind of thoughts on my mind, is how do we become a district of somewhat choice with limited options for transportation?
mm,
So as we start to think about the future of MMSD, if we want to encourage and innovate and provide additional choices, that has to be side by side with staffing and with transportation.
thank you for that, Dr. Gothard. So are
It
you,
makes think of a lot more, I know.
yeah, so are you thinking that as we get more information about potential, a review of our boundaries, starting to think about how our programming, is currently situated, might meet new needs based on development across the city, that there might be a more extensive plan specifically around our DLI and bilingual education?
I think as one example, yes, but I also think that if we're going to look at rerouting transportation to make all of our school sites more accessible, it then opens up opportunities for additional innovation as well. I don't have them defined,
Yeah,
but it's part of our strategic framework. That, that's going to be one of the focus areas, is how do we innovate? How do we meet this moment with preparing our students for the future in ways that we perhaps haven't?
okay. Thank you.
Board Member Shababo?
I was wondering, is there anything to offer any language via virtual programming instead of in person to kind of eliminate some barriers or even add access to different things? People are very used to programs like Duolingo, so like it's not something that's abstract for people to continue to grow with later on. Like, okay, is that something that we're looking into?
I would say for virtual, we have opportunities in the area of world language.
Can you talk a little bit louder?
Oh, I'm sorry. For virtual, usually I'm too loud. For virtual, we have opportunities in the area of world language. So through our Madison Promise, students that are in Madison Promise have access to world language through Madison Virtual Campus, which happens usually at middle school and high school. There's opportunities for world language. So I would say in the area of world language, yes, virtual options exist. Usually it exists either if they're fully online through Madison Promise or their coursework they need to take. There's a barrier with their schedule in order to access something, or students have already exited out of all of the opportunities we have, and through things like what we call our early college credit program, where they can access additional language courses at UW and or four-year institution. So in those ways, that's what we have. In terms of our dual language immersion program, I would say no, because it is actually the instructional design and it's the way the students do school. And so it hasn't been a conversation as of yet.
Board Member Sarabo, I think one other additional model that I have seen is when you have a staff member or maybe two that are fluent in that language, it does open up some opportunities to offer virtual learning that's different than virtual school. But then it comes down to aligning schedules, making sure that there's adequate supervision, there's an understanding, perhaps even an MOU with, the teachers union to, just to make sure that you've thought about all those things. And again, this could be part of some ongoing have in terms of how to meet the needs of students. But right now, we're not set up that way.
Okay. It's just a thought, 'cause I think, I know some schools have only access to certain language opportunities. Oh, I know that's a struggle.
We have excellent staff here to, it's our job to put them most effective position possible. And I think that's where the challenges of spread out.
Okay.
You know, it meets the geographic, it makes geographical sense, but it can be very difficult for capacity and efficacy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Board Member Bravo. Board Member Castro.
Thank you. So my question is about staffing. And so I'm wondering if you can speak generally to the role that our community partners do in terms of ensuring that our students are able to receive all services that they may need, whether it be therapy or social work or what have you. And then my second question is, in terms of meeting the staffing needs, is there a priority placed on this with our teacher education programs here in Madison or through our Grow Your Own program?
So I'll thank you, Board Member Castro, for the questions. I will start and then I'll let my colleague chime in. We're excited about a partnership with Edgewood, but to answer your questions around kind of community partners, our mental health department has a bilingual mental health navigator. BRS, I was looking over at Leah, I wanted to make sure I got the name right, but that individual both is supporting families as well as students to not only provide language support, but also to navigate our city where they may need mental health supports. We are part of it's called the BIPOC Mental Health Collaborative. Also, it's relatively new. I might have that name wrong, but our team from the mental health team and student services team has joined and has been collaborating there as well. At our high schools, every high school has a bilingual counselor. We ensure that there is one additional counselor that it provides bilingual services. And then for the other areas of psych and social worker, we're always looking for and preferring if we can find bilingual social workers and psychologists. That does not exist at every school, but that is definitely something we're looking into. The short answer for your second question is yes, we are working on a few programs, and I'll let Leah chime in about some of the Grow Your Own or certification programs.
So we definitely are connected with our local institutions of higher education. So currently, UW offers an opportunity for folks to get their bilingual license. However, it used to be a master's only program. Now they've been able to shift that to a capstone program. They are not going to start that though until next summer of 2026. We continue to be in conversation with them about opportunities for folks who are returning adults who would like to get their license to be able to access a licensing option through UW. We also have our partner with Edgewood, where they have an accelerated licensure program for both ESL and bilingual. We offer that tuition reimbursement through the use of Title III funding right now, to be able to, any staff member who would like to add that on to their license can do so through that reimbursement program. We then partnered just recently this year with Edgewood Urban League to get a DWD grant. So Edgewood is currently accepting, well, yesterday was the deadline, accepting applications for their first cohort of folks to be able to get licensure in those areas. And then UW Whitewater has also created an accelerated license program that is mainly, I believe, asynchronous online. So folks can add those licenses on. I think that one thing to remember is that in all cases, bilingual licensing is an add-on. So you need to have a general ed license, or type of license to be able to add that to it. Otherwise, you might take some coursework and have nothing to add it to. Versus our ESL licensing is also an MMSD, something that you add onto your core content license so that we have staff who are well prepared to support students across different environments.
Thank you so much, Board Member Castro. I don't see any other questions from my fellow board members. I want to thank you all so much for your really thoughtful questions and this really great presentation this evening. I'd like us to move on to our Office of Youth Reengagement.
All right, give us 1 second to transition. Thank you so much, Board Chair. Thank you. I'm going to invite up two of my colleagues to join us for this next presentation while they are transitioning. Tonight, we know that this was an ask of many Board of Education members to get an update both around our overall Office of Youth Reengagement programming, and then some specific areas as it relates to our expulsion abeyance program. So two of my colleagues will be joining us. Jesse, would you start the slides again? We have Tina Geyer, who is our Executive Director of the Office of Youth Reengagement. And we have Lily H., and I say that because I always pronounce her last name wrong, who is our Coordinator of Progressive Discipline. We have Leah Esser, who is also here, and Jay Affeld in the background, also instrumental to some of the updates that we will provide tonight. Could you go to the next slide, please, Jesse? And with that, I am going to turn it over to Tina Geyer to get us started.
Thank you, members of the board, for this opportunity to speak with you this evening. I do want to start off, first of all, expressing some gratitude for the outstanding staff, students, families, and partners I get the opportunity to work alongside every day. The Office of Youth Reengagement. Over the past few years, the Office of Youth Reengagement has evolved to span a range of programming options serving students from across MMSD and beyond. As you can see, the Office of Youth Reengagement collaborates with a variety of contracted partners, as well as offering our own unique programming options through the Innovative High School. Though not under the OIR umbrella, we are strengthening our connections with both Capital and Shabazz high schools in an effort to build a continuum of alternative high school options. As an office, our network is vast and our staff is small and dedicated, with our students at the center and the heart of everything we do. Next slide, please. Another way to view our programming under OIR is through the lens of delivery model. Our in-house programs are ever evolving to ensure opportunities are responsive to the strengths, interests, and learning needs of all students. We gather this input through quantitative and qualitative data collected from students, families, staff, and our comprehensive school partners. Similarly, we work with a variety of community partners to provide a range of graduation pathway opportunities to fit the goals and support needs of students and families. Our final subgroup of program options include Restore, which we will discuss further shortly, and Metro, Middle, and High School. We have invested in developing a strong project-based learning model in these settings to foster deep and relevant learning opportunities across the content areas and integrate the arts into the learning experience based on student interests and goals. Next slide, please. Innovative High has the privilege of serving students from across MMSD. This visualization of enrollment and completion trends over the past 2 years shows a significant increase in graduation rates for our students who identify as Black and our students with an IEP. What we don't see here is the incredible community our students and staff develop and celebrate every day. This year, Innovative High has focused on the concept of identity, who we are as individuals and who we are together. This photo you see in the top right corner is of a very large mural, it's 8 feet by 8 feet, our students created together in partnership with a local artist known as Artifacts, and this came to us through our partnership with the Madison Public Library Team Bubbler. Our students have selected our school colors. This year we are black and gold, and we are continuing to work toward a school mascot that represents our community. We have it narrowed down to 2. We will await to next year for the final votes on that. Next slide, please. As we move into our update on Metro Middle and High School, I do want to provide a brief overview. Metro is made up of 4 sites serving young people with court and other systems involvement. Metro Shelter is located over on Atwood Avenue. Metro Detention on the 2nd floor of the City County building. Both of these programs serve our students aged 10 to 17 who have involvement in juvenile court and human services systems. Metro Jail in Huber consists of 2 classrooms spanning the 2 buildings that house the Dane County Jail, serving our students 16 to 21 years old with involvement in the adult justice system. Next slide, please. Building relationships, community, and a sense of belonging is central to the work happening in all of the Metro classrooms. In the juvenile system spaces, students experience a relatively short length of stay. Last year, the average length of stay was 16 days in Metro Detention and Shelter combined. Here we focus on connecting with our young people, learning about their school experience thus far and where they would like it to go. We focus on reading and math skill assessments. They're completed shortly following enrollment, and we use those data points as well as the input from the students to develop learning goals for their time while they're with us. Teachers focus on daily literacy lessons and fold in programming to support completing those state graduation requirements, civics, health, personal finance, and make that school experience as meaningful and relevant as possible. Students at Metro Shelter benefit from a wide range of experiential learning opportunities in our community. Our teacher at Metro Shelter has cultivated and maintained a variety of partnerships, including First Tee of South Central Wisconsin, and now a developing partnership with Old Brick Botanical Gardens to offer our students a range of opportunities to explore interests and actively engage with learning. In our adult system spaces, students experience a significantly longer length of stay. Overall, for the 23-24 school year, the average was 142 days. Students and staff at Metro Jail in Huber focus on developing and achieving personalized graduation pathways based on where students want to go and meeting them with where they are. Through a blend of instructional practices, including project-based learning, online learning platforms, and collaborative learning, students are supported as they work to achieve the goals they set for themselves and exceed the high expectations we all hold together. Next slide, please. The teachers and support staff serving our students in the Metro sites are among the finest in MMSD. They are a small and mighty team who work hard to build meaningful relationships and partnerships with our community to enhance and extend learning experiences for our students. This list of partners is not exhaustive, and we value all of our partnerships in support of young people. It's not possible for 1 or 2 teachers at a Metro site to provide all of the learning experiences our students want, need, and deserve. Our community partners work closely and collaboratively with our teachers to develop creative ways of making learning exciting, meaningful, and deeply enriching. For example, this year, Rudy Bankston from IMWE Global Village and IMWE Coaching and Mentoring partnered with the staff at Metro Jail on a project using podcasting as a medium for exploring concepts of community and identity. As a school that is committed to continuous improvement, we are excited to be in the early stages of working with the Black Men's Coalition to enhance our personal finance coursework and develop connections for mentorship that will begin while students are enrolled in Metro and then extend into the community after their Metro enrollments end. Next slide, please. This snapshot of our Metro enrollment data for the past 2 years shows an overall decline in enrollments across all of the sites. It is important to note that Metro and Middle High serve students who come to us from outside of MMSD as well as MMSD students. In fact, of the 88 enrollments at Metro Detention and Shelter combined, 42 were for students arriving from outside of MMSD. In Metro Jail in Huber this year, 10 of the 28 enrollments were for young people arriving from outside of MMSD. Regardless, once students are with us, they are folded into our MMSD community and they become part of the Metro family. The vast majority of our students in the jail program identify a desire to become a mentor as a component of their school plan. This mentorship often occurs naturally within the Metro jail spaces through interactions with graduates positioning themselves to support younger peers both in and outside the classrooms. Our staff and students are also working to develop projects for young people across the Metro sites. And potentially beyond, to share their stories and offer mentorship and support while maintaining confidentiality through the use of zines and podcasting. Some of you may have had the opportunity to see and hear our soapbox speeches delivered by our Metro students at the district-wide event just a few weeks ago. The voices and experience of our young people hold tremendous power, and we are committed to supporting them and creating platforms to be heard. Next slide.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for having me. As Cindy indicated, my name is Lily Hangartner, and I'm the coordinator for progressive discipline for the district. The majority of my work is centered inside the Department of Student and Staff Supports, although naturally, as a result of the work and support that I do for the schools in our district, there's a lot of cross-departmental collaboration that I do, including in this case, specific with Restore, with the Office of Youth Reengagement. Next slide, please. Restore functions fundamentally as our district's expulsion abeyance program or alternative program that is offered to all eligible students who may be recommended for expulsion pre-expulsion, meaning that students who participate, who agree to participate in our Restore program do so prior to any expulsion hearing occurring and thereby protect themselves from the possible risk of expulsion at an expulsion. The main benefits of Restore as we see it, fundamentally and true to its name, that Restore functions as a restorative approach that we encompass through all of the parts of the program, upholding our restorative justice principles throughout a student's time and length in Restore. Because of the size, the small size and more individualized setting that Restore is able to provide to students who are participating, Restore provides an opportunity for students to reset and reflect from the behavior that may have brought them to Restore outside of the environment at their comprehensive high school or the conflict that may have contributed to them arriving with us at Restore. And in addition to giving students that opportunity to reset, it also provides a smaller and more individualized academic setting for students to re-engage in their academic programming. I say that because for some of the students that enter into Restore, these are students who may have at some point become disengaged and less invested in their academic programming. And for students that is the case for, that smaller and more individualized setting that Restore offers actually also gives them the opportunity to reinvest in their own academic programming and gives them that more one-on-one individualized attention. Lastly, and maybe most importantly, by successfully completing Restore, students, as I said, are protected from any risk of the expulsion at an expulsion hearing. We permanently dismiss the expulsion recommendation from the student's record. It's not hanging over their head for the rest of their academic career with us. And the student is welcomed home to their home school. Or for students who are interested and have expressed interest in participating in other alternative programming. Many of those programs are also coordinated through the Office of Youth Reengagement, or OYR. And so participating in Restore has a dual benefit of allowing students to forge those relationships with our OYR and Restore staff. And when students and families are indicating that they're interested in access to that alternative programming, participation in Restore also happens to have the benefit of allowing us to sort of tailor those next steps for students based on what students and their families are indicating that they are looking for themselves. And I'll also note that post-COVID in the 2023-24 school year, Restore relaunched itself in person under the Office of Youth Reengagement, and which we know, of course, that in-person programming offers a vast benefit for students. Next slide, please.
So in terms of programming, since we've returned to in-person instruction, we've determined that a two-cohort hybrid model has been most effective in the Restore space. Students attend half-day in person with a strong project-based learning focus. And then the other half of the day, when they are not on site, they are engaged with online learning platforms that have been approved through MMSD in order to continue with skill development and moving forward with credit attainment. Throughout the programming, social emotional learning is both embedded in all of the instruction we do, as well as explicit through our community time, which is where we begin our in-person component together as a group in the mornings. Quarters 2 and 4, our school social worker is working in collaboration with a clinician from Journey Mental Health. And we have a Face Kids group that we offer with students in preparation for their transition back to the comprehensive environments as they're ready to leave us. And it's really focused in on those transitional skills that students are identifying for themselves, what they need to dig in with, clinician and our social worker work students. Next slide, please.
We do want to acknowledge and we recognize both that there has been this year for our 24-25 school year, a 29% increase in students who are participating in Restore and the enrollment in Restore. And that of our demographic of students in Restore, that almost 2/3 of those students, both for the 23-24 and the 24-25 year, identify as either Black or African American, as well as half of our students in Restore for both the 23-24 and 24-25 year are students who are receiving IEP services. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry, I want to pause at the slide that you just went at and ask how many students are both African American and receiving IEP services?
I don't know if I have that exact percentage, but I can absolutely pull those numbers relatively quickly, and I can get that information, that answer back to you.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that I think it could be misleading to have those groups separated and not acknowledge that there is a significant number of Black students with IEPs that are in this program.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm good with us moving forward.
Next slide, please. With respect to transition teaming, I'll start first with transition teaming around students entering and returning from their time at Restore. Much of the transition work into students starting at Restore is done by myself. As the expulsion recommendation process is moving forward, I communicate with families and students to discuss how the process functions and operates to ensure that families and students have that information so that they know both what their rights are and what opportunities exist within our district, both for them to participate and Restore if we get to that point in the process, and just to make sure that they are able to make a decision that is informed and that is going to work best for them. So with that said, I will meet in person with students and families to talk through both the process and what Restore is able to offer, how Restore functions, the expectations of Restore, as well as any concerns or barriers that families might be indicating that might exist as they're making those decisions, to ensure that we are, to the best of our ability, removing any barriers or challenges that might prevent families and students from electing to participate in Restore. That can include support with transportation, which we do offer to all students and families who voice a concern, knowing that our Restore program is housed sort of centrally within Madison, and that our families, of course, are coming from all over the city, and that not all students and families have access to adequate or transportation that may meet their needs. Because attendance in Restore is a part and an expectation of student success in the program, we want to remove any of those transportation barriers so that that is not creating an issue for students. I also do a lot of communicating with both the students' homeschool and any particular support staff there, just to ensure that we know as much as we need to know about the student so we can prepare for their success in Restore.
And then we start getting involved with easing that transition over to the office. And that usually begins with us inviting the student and the families into the space to get familiar with the surroundings, to meet the staff, to once again revisit the expectations of the program and begin planning for exit upon entry. We start the conversation of where you want to go next, where is going to fit best for you next, and getting input from families right away on day one. And then we begin folding young people into the space at Restore. That's our approach overall with transitions across OIR and Metro, is that exit planning upon entry. We want to make sure that we're establishing communication with the comprehensive home schools. When students arrive in our Metro sites, either our transition coordinator or our Metro department chair reaches out to a cross systems point of contact at the high schools, typically a social worker, to let them know that a young person is in our space so that we keep kids grounded in their home schools throughout their time at Metro. As we begin ending our time together for Restore, it's very predictable. It's the end of a quarter or the end of a semester. We start those transition meetings about a month in advance. We hold that first round of meetings good 4 weeks out. We include staff from the home schools, the parents, and any kind of an identified trusted adult that the young people indicate that they would like present at that meeting, so we can start talking through what our options are and have time to pivot before the end of that term if needed, as needed. Metro's a little bit trickier because we don't have control or knowledge of when students are going to be leaving our spaces. We do our very best to estimate, and our transition coordinator is involved. This year he's been focused on developing transition teams before comprehensive high schools, including an AP, a social worker, sometimes it's a case manager, the restorative justice coach for that school, as well as a trusted adult identified by that student. The idea is to have a smooth handoff back into their school environment if that's where the student is electing to go, and then have that adult around support as they integrate back into that setting.
Next slide, please. What we also want to acknowledge is that both there is a lot of work that is being done throughout the district to both from the culture and climate side, as well as more specific to support students who might be communicating with their behavior that there are needs that are not being met, for us to really work on that proactive piece, as well as when students are when students are communicating that those needs, that we are really being proactive and reactive in order to limit the number of students who are faced with a situation where an expulsion recommendation may occur, and of course, then where restore might come into play. And so a lot of that current work sort of goes hand in hand with the language that you see in the behavior education plan around kind of getting to the root causes of what students are trying to communicate through their behavior. And so I've kind of noted that, sort of functional behavior analysis work that is occurring, as well as safety planning, so that we are really being responsive at the earlier stages of concerning student behavior, as opposed to just waiting, of course, until the worst case scenario happens. As well as our partnerships with community providers, with Dane County Human Service providers, case managers, to the extent that students may be court involved, also communicating back and forth with community supports that a student may have in place to ensure that we're doing a lot of wraparound and holistic support that way. And then the cross systems work that is always ongoing, and that is especially sort of housed through our Office of School Safety as well. We also know that there is a lot of future work and a lot of work that is left to be done, and that continues to be needed, which includes growing and continuing expanding those community partners and the relationships that we have, so that we're investing and able to have our students access investment and opportunities, so that that doesn't just live within the boundaries of our actual school buildings. As well as acknowledging that the violence prevention collaboration is what we see as an essential element of success in sort of reducing the number of students both who are coming into contact with our Metro programs, as well as, of course, Restore. And keeping in line with what I mentioned earlier around acknowledging that sometimes there is an overlap with students who have become disengaged in their academic programming, and that those students then at some point may find themselves unfortunately becoming court involved or in the expulsion process. Understanding that that disengagement or those struggles that students may be communicating around their academic programming doesn't happen overnight and tends to have a snowball effect. And so we want to really be, proactive and acknowledging by focusing on how we're investing in our middle school students, so that we are really addressing those problems at the first signs of concern or engagement, and being proactive around those strategies. And then lastly, expanding our project-based learning opportunities, especially for students who are, when they are participating in the virtual component of Restore, to ensure that they are getting as much access to the opportunities that they need, so that we can ensure their success, not only during Restore, but moving forward afterwards. And at this point, I will pause for any questions.
Sure, Mulder, if I could just add one final comment. It struck me hearing Tina present tonight that I've worked with Tina for a lot of years. I won't say how many, more than 20. And hearing her describe all the thought that is put into this type of programming, I want all of you to know that she used to do this as a teacher. And she didn't have an office or this kind of support. Community partnerships were all, done by her and her colleague who worked with a school contact. And it's unfortunate that we have to build this kind of structure, but I have to tell you that we have the right person leading this work. I've seen Tina's dedication from never giving up on a child, that's for sure. And it makes me feel really good that we're thinking about this as a part of our community and not just some afterthought. So Tina, thank you, and Lily, great work as well. So happy to see this kind of future work that you were thinking about.
Thank you so much for those remarks, Dr. Gothard. Board members, do you have any questions about our Office of Youth Reengagement? President Nichols, and then I see Board Member Saravo.
Thank you, Chair Muldo. Thank you for the presentation. Wow, there's a lot in here tonight. I'm gonna start with kind of where you just ended about Restore, and I was wondering, as you all have been working with Restore, are you seeing anything around like more common student, I don't wanna call them offenses, but student reasons why they would end up in Restore? Or are there not commonalities? It's just more unique? Yeah, I'm just curious about what leads students and families into Restore. Yes, and then additionally, since you had talked about the average number of days in Metro and Metro Huber, I am curious, what's the average length of stay or in Restore?
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Lily, why don't you start with the
Sure.
kind of what we're seeing in terms of trends?
Yes, so I would say yes. I think we can see some trends. Of course, the behavior education plan has very sort of strict and tight guidelines around what types of behaviors are even eligible for an expulsion recommendation.
Yep.
That list is relatively short to begin with. And I would say, by and large, I think the sort of trends around behavior and concerns that we are seeing that are bringing our students into and through this process are really revolve around, conflict that may have started or sort of kind of spills over back and forth between the community and then into our school buildings, conflict between students. That, of course, that behavior doesn't necessarily result in an expulsion recommendation, but to the extent that, for instance, serious physical injury is a result of an altercation or a conflict, that could be, that is a trend potentially that we're seeing, as well as students who are finding themselves in possession of certain types of weapons. Again, not every item is one that qualifies as a level 5, but I would say that that is maybe one of the main trends, is behavior that has sort of started at its nexus around interpersonal and student-to-student conflict, as well as, of course, when there is behavior that a student engages in that then ends up resulting in staff members being, as the like terms it, physically attacked. I'm just using that specific language because that's what the is. And then I think I can answer unless you want to take. I would say in terms of average length of stay for our students, we have very tight and strict kind of timelines that apply to all of our students who are offered the opportunity to participate in Restore. And we do that, of course, just to ensure consistency and equity. Generally speaking, there's kind of a table that indicates, depending on the time of year that a student's behavior occurs, that will dictate the length of time that a student will be in Restore. But generally speaking, up to and about for a semester. That may be altered slightly. Our middle school students are, function under a little bit of a different application of that, but typically up to and including a semester of school.
Thank you for that. Can I just follow up? So if you're seeing and understanding that it's oftentimes interpersonal student-to-student conflict that then has escalated to a point where they would have been expulsion, but they're able to come into Restore. I appreciate how you talked about the transitions and the exit planning from the very beginning. I guess I'm wondering about a student's sense of well-being and safety and finding a place where maybe they can have less conflict leaving Restore. So if you could just help maybe explain that a little bit more, like, are there students that actually choose to go to a completely different school, or students that might, I don't know, want to explore some other option just so that they don't find themselves back in the very situation? And how do you engage family members around that?
Yes, and, right? So
Okay.
it can be both. I think one advantage of having Restore housed under the Office of Youth Engagement is we also house out the alternatives. So we can begin sharing information about alternative programming options early on and providing one-pagers or conversations. We're very communicative with our families from day one. We're in regular dialogue via text, phone call, email, what have you. And we start talking about, that's one of the questions I asked during the intake interview. Do you see yourself returning to your school of origin when you leave here? Is that what you want? Is that your goal?
Mm,
And if it's not, let's start talking about what other opportunities there are available to you so you can make informed decisions and have choices.
mhm.
So yeah, it's both. Sometimes, yes, sometimes students opt to go back to their home schools and they're successfully reintegrated and it goes great. We do have families who will reach out through Let's Chat and see how they can do strict transfer. That they want to go to a different high school, perhaps, you know, on the same side of town, some perhaps not.
Mhm.
And looking at, you know, are you a junior in your fourth quarter? Are we looking at Operation Fresh Start? Are we looking at the competency portfolio program, GED option 2? What other avenues do we want to pursue? Capital High, Shabazz. We have a school counselor who's aware of when those referral and lottery windows are open. And we have those conversations with the families. Here's what you need to know about Shabazz. Is this something you would like to apply for?
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you for that. For the students who want to return back to their home school of origin, I feel like, Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like in the earlier days of OYR, that transition wasn't always, I don't wanna say as successful, but it was harder. And for the student to really kind of re-enter, after being out for a semester. And I am curious, what we, if I'm remembering that correctly, what have we learned and tried differently,
I'll
over the
share-
years?
I'll share a couple things and then Tina can definitely go into detail, but a reminder that a couple investments have happened since then.
Okay,
We did not have strong transitions through back all of that. We invested, the board invested in a transition coordinator in the Office of Youth Reengagement. Currently that is Chauncey Haste, who is our transition. So he has really been kind of building that. The second is at the comprehensive high schools, the board also invested in restorative justice coaches that are like intimately involved in not just the transition back to, but the transition through as a trusted adult while students are coming back. So those are two, I think, really key investments that helped that. And then I'll turn it to Tina to talk about more details because they've been working through this for a couple of years.
Yeah, and I think that having the conversations early and often during a student's period of enrollment at Restore has been really critical with that. Starting at the very beginning, but always checking in, doing progress updates with the school. This is what we're seeing. This is what we see going well. What recommendations do you have for us? What should we be focusing on to prepare them to return, right?
mhm,
And then opening up those dialogues and having those meetings over a series of weeks to prepare for that reintegration back.
The ownership of the school transition team though has also
mm,
changed over time.
It has,
We've been really clear about making sure you're a key set of people and those people are kind of creating their own check-in processes. So I just wanted to add that piece because that I think was also, it varied at every school, kind of who was responsible and how. And so I think that's been a huge piece of it.
thank you. Chair Muldrow, I just have like two more questions about very specific slides, if you don't mind. Jesse, are you able to pull up the slide? It was the very first one for this section, for this presentation. It shows many options, one umbrella work chart. Thank you. I'm looking at the legend and just wanting to make sure I understand what I see on this screen. So you did a beautiful job talking through the various components of Metro, middle, high, Huber, detention. I think I understand that. And the purple means there's not, you can't refer in. Okay, got it. For restore, that's also a purple, which means it's non-referral. So I just want to track then. So a student would be engaged, let's say in an interpersonal conflict, it got violent, it got escalated. According to the behavior education plan, whatever went down would have put them at like a level 5, and they would be up for expulsion. How then do they get into restore if it's non-referring?
Yes, so you're correct, of course, that Restore is exclusively for students who have been recommended for expulsion and are navigating the expulsion recommendation process. So I think by saying that it's non-referable, that would refer to, you know, a school reaching out to us to say, hey, this student has not been recommended for expulsion, but we think that
Oh,
this type of
okay,
setting would
okay.
be a good fit for them.
That,
Yeah.
that explains it. Okay, good. All right, thank you. And then I think I understand everything. So innovative high are all of the things, including night school. Okay. And then Capital High and Shabazz are also under the umbrella or no? They're, okay,
They
okay,
are separate high schools.
right,
As also alternative high schools, which Innovative High School is too. We are trying to network together to make sure that we're offering a variety of alternative high school options for
okay,
all the students district.
Professional development is a place where a
Mhm.
lot of times they'll professional. That application processes and more partnering to have aligned approach across our system versus they still are supervised FL currently in standalone in high schools, but there's a lot of similar components that they would try to just work together as three schools that don't fit quite as nice with collaboration of the comprehensive high school. So thought partnership is just another way. to describe it. Yeah.
okay. Thank you for explaining that, yes, when I saw Capital High and Shabazz on here,
Mhm.
and then the Innovative High, I was trying to figure out exactly how those fit. Okay, but that explains it. All right, my next slide is 2 down from there, Jesse, the Innovative High and then contracted programs enrollment. And I am just curious, when I look at all the top line, that's the all IAE students. What can you tell me about the time period from 22-23 up to 23-24, and then, you know, we're relatively consistent enrollment. Is that post-pandemic the bump that, yeah, and then there was like a slower recovery period for students to get back enrolled, or how would you explain that?
I think, well, one, yes, post-COVID. I think, 2 things where we're starting to see an increase up though also is additional programming that has been created in-house. So if you recall a couple of years ago, we gave to what used to only be contracted out programs like Omega School, Gateway to College, Madison, HSCD, OFS. We, in the last 2 years, as Tina has come on, as she's really tried to be thinking about what I would within MMSD programming as well. And so I think that's where you see the spike from 143 to 66.
Okay,
Because we last year had the first time our own in-house GED2 program. That was another way for students to create a graduation plan and graduate via MMSD. And so I think those numbers, it's a little lower now by a few, but
Yeah.
yeah, but I think that's the spike is the in-house created programs outside of just what used to only be mostly contracted programs.
I appreciate that, Cindy. Let me just look at the
Yeah.
data though, because we were at 163 in 21-22.
Mhm.
Then there was a decline, and then we went back up again. So I wasn't So did some of that programming that you say, was that also present in 21, 22?
No,
Or is there
the
some other
difference was
phenomenon?
no, the difference is we had more seats through our contracted program. Pre-COVID. And at that time, when this office, because this office was about 5 years old,
Mhm.
at that time, starting to think about how we brought that program in-house and what we weren't just paying contracted providers. And so that's where you see why we're back up to where we were kind of at that point, and that 1 year dip was when we were creating in-house programming, but started to shift the dollars.
Got
Does
it.
that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Sorry,
you very
I didn't clarify that at first, yeah.
No, that's great. All right, thank you. That's all for me right now.
Board Member Sharavo?
But to start off on a high, I actually got to attend her graduation here, which was really unique because it was a really small program. So I got to hear all the students stand up and just talk about their experiences. And then even the teachers came up and did the same thing. So it was as much a joy to attend that, to see how much work they had put into it and how much the staff just loved working with the students and to see them go on from there. So that was great because I've never been able to appreciate that before. I had two different questions in mind. When Board Member Muldred asked on that one specific piece, I was just wondering, is there, I don't know if this is getting too specific, but is there a trend to be looked at how many students also have a like a personalized behavior education plan? Like, is that a trend as well? Or is that?
And you're referring to like a student with a disability that may have a behavior support plan or?
Right, that's not always, they don't live together necessarily.
Sure. I mean, our cohort group, of course, is relatively, generally speaking, small. So I think both Tina and I know, have a good working knowledge of the students that are in Restore. So to my memory, I would say that there is a pretty big overlap with respect to the students, that are students receiving IEP services at Restore, that by and large, many of those students will have behavior support plans. Of course, how those are written and, what is included within them would have previously been determined by their own IEP team. But I would say, this is just kind of going off of my memory, that there's a pretty big overlap between both students in Restore who are receiving IEP services and that same group of students also potentially,
I'm just wondering, do you track it? Would we be able to just see that as well?
Yes, that's absolutely data that we would be able to pull, yes.
Okay. So my other question is, a lot of this stuff that you said you work within MMSD and outside of MMSD as well?
In terms of the partnerships or?
Trying to remember exactly what context that you said that.
What I said.
before. Yes.
The Metro, was it the Metro? The young people in Metro that there was.
It was early on. Let's try to.
It might be.
Yeah.
That would have been Metro.
Yeah. So if we had a student that was like coming in from outside of it, that had maybe already gone through a expulsion process in that district, but we may not have reacted in the same manner.
I just wanna, so sorry, I wanna
Yeah.
clarify, so you're referring to our policy on expulsion?
Not
Cause
necessarily.
that's not,
I don't know.
it's not necessarily Metro. Okay, sorry, then say more.
I guess I'm asking because I don't exactly know where this like would live necessarily. And people are moving around all the time. So if there's a student or there's students that kind of run out of options sometimes. But sometimes they're coming in from their moving families, they're just moving around. Like what options are available to those students? Like I know there's specific policies that have to do with expulsion, very specifically.
Yeah.
But if we wouldn't have reacted in the same way that another district, like what happens to students?
Let me just make sure I understand your question.
Do we have options for them, I guess?
So a student that was expelled in another school district, but wants to enroll in MMSD, is that the question?
They would to move into our district.
So depending on the expulsion, we have limitations around that, but I'll let Lily,
Yeah, specific to students who have been expelled from other districts, we do have, and I actually printed it out so I would know the number. It's our board policy 4046 that refers to that. And the language is relatively clear that currently our board policy prohibits us from enrolling a student within MMSD who has been expelled from another public school district within Wisconsin, regardless of whether we as a district would have moved forward or recommended that student for expulsion. So
based on the district's decision, not our.
yes, so essentially that the way that our current board policy is written, we are required to essentially sort of provide reciprocity for another Wisconsin public school district's expulsion order, regardless of whether that behavior would have resulted in an expulsion recommendation with us. For students who may have been expelled from a school outside of Wisconsin, our policy states that the only time that we would deny that student's enrollment is if MMSD would have likewise recommended that student for expulsion based on the behavior. So we would receive behavior records in both cases. But if it's a student who is coming to us from outside of the state, who's been expelled from a school outside of Wisconsin, then we would only deny enrollment if their behavior would have also resulted in an expulsion recommendation with us. Does that?
Yeah, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
Because we have, like, we can't.
I know.
It's figured out, we have it's two different lanes. I just want to make sure that was like still clear. That's why I was asking of like outside of the district. So I just didn't know if there was.
Is that
other
5 years or?
At least currently, the way that 4046 is written, there is not a specific time frame that is prescribed. Of course, we as a district have, our policy does not, we do not pursue expulsions for students, in perpetuity or until the age of 21. That's just not something that our district does. However, we know that other public school districts in Wisconsin and otherwise do. And so I mean, to your point, it's absolutely accurate that like there are students that find themselves in these situations where, MMSD would not have moved forward in the same way. And yet, some of our public school districts will have very, there won't be an end date essentially to that student's expulsion, which creates,
That's kind of where I see like the bigger problem is like they're determining the next 3 to 5.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Castro?
Hi, yeah, I was wondering if y'all can speak to how particularly students in Metro receive mental health services they need, and any gaps that there might be in the system.
Yeah, thank you for that. So it's very site specific. Given short length of stay, mental health services and supports are gonna look different in our spaces that are juvenile court involved or juvenile systems involved. We have a strong partnership with our county staff in the facilities in which we're housed, where mental health services are provided in-house by their contracted providers. In Metro Jail, we have been running CBITS groups in collaboration with our own jail, our own MMSD mental health team and a Journey provider. That's been going on for the last 2 years now. And again, in partnership with the mental health teams and providers that are staffed through the county facility in which we're housed.
Okay. And then are there any like what are the gaps in the system that you think that we should pay special attention to or that we can focus on?
Yeah, would you?
Yeah, Board Member Castro, thank you for that question. A couple things I'll share and then I'll turn it back over to Tina. One, I think it depends on, which of the 4 divisions you're talking about, because, access in those spaces is different, and also, as Tina mentioned, length of stay. But I think in general, 2 things that we, are continuing to work on, and this is where we've been really investing kind of our non-personnel dollars in the last few years. It shows up on that pink slide that, Tina walked through, is thinking about not just the mental health services, but the mentorship and or adults that maybe have shared similar experiences, or adults that can really relate to our students that are in there and provide services, even just in terms of, like I said, the mentorship, real mental health services, and then other supports that students need as well. I think that the volume that is needed for those students and the one-on-one supports that is needed for those students sometimes is just greater than what we are able to currently provide. And then the limitations, especially when Jailer Huber, I think we have just run into some county barriers as well. But those are just a couple of things that I would name. I think the team is doing an amazing job, and we have community partners all across the city that are stepping up and really wanting to support, but a few of those areas. And mental health providers that look like our students also, in terms of just being able to relate to them.
That would be
Yeah.
a huge area of growth. And I would say the deeply relational work of everything that takes place in those metro classrooms is in and of itself a significant mental health support. Social emotional learning goals are a part of everyone's graduation pathway and a part of everyone's school-based plan. So it's working with the teachers directly. The teachers carry the brunt of the load, and they do it with grace and incredible skill. And I think the students coming together in community in the classroom spaces is also another tremendous support that we can't overstate. I think it's of great value. Our young people pool together and support one another and grow themselves in that process. So yeah. Is there room for more? Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your questions, Board Member Castro. We'll hear from Board Member Vandermeulen a second time, and then, or I'm sorry, the first time. And then I'd like to add myself to the stack.
At least when I did juvenile law, shelter didn't have a mental health component for juveniles. Do they now have one on staff in the shelter?
I can't speak to that.
But in Metro, they do have one at least.
We have a school social worker who supports the space, a school counselor who supports the space, and students in shelter, because that's a non-secure custody facility, have access to outside community providers while they are housed there.
That is what I was
Yeah.
curious about. My second question on transition, I'm not talking transition back to the community, but disability transition with IEP. Do you also do that as well?
Correct. Yes, we do.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your questions, Board Member Vandermeulen. I greatly appreciate this presentation and highlighting the work we're doing with these groups of students. I really loved hearing that Rudy Banks was working with our young people, in part because Rudy Banks is a person who experienced incarceration for a significant period of his life for a crime that he did not commit. Do we know how many of our students who are arrested and criminalized in our juvenile detention center end up having their charges dismissed or end up being accused of a crime that they actually did not commit?
That is not data I have.
I think that's relevant. I think it's particularly relevant when we talk about the 18-day stay as if it's a short amount of time. I had never spent 18 days away from my parents before I moved out of my home and went to college. 18 days in the juvenile detention center is 18 days that students are not allowed to go outside, that they're not exposed to daylight. It's 18 days where they have no physical contact with their relevance, with their relatives, and they're only allowed visits through glass. It's a really significant period of time, and the fact that the majority of the students that we incarcerate in our community are African American, disabled, and living in poverty is something that we should find tremendously concerning and really be working to address. I have a question about gender. The Dane County Juvenile Detention Center, as far as I am aware of, is inclusive of all genders. Can you give me a breakdown of what percentage of our incarcerated youth are, identify as girls versus boys versus trans or non-binary?
Yep, I think 90% identify as male, but I'm sorry, for Chair Mulder, I'm pulling the slide back up. I think, because I think we had it on the slide.
I think
Are you speaking specifically just to detention, all of the sites? It looks a little different. Are you speaking specifically to detention?
I am speaking specifically to detention, but if you have a more holistic number, I would totally engage with that.
No. I can speak to, just from my experience in the jail, it was about 90% of our students identify as male. I think it's similar in detention. I don't have a direct number for you on that, but I can pull that data.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm going to ask that there's data pulled on what percentage of these students are receiving free or reduced lunch, what percentage of these students are white, and what percentage of these students identify as boys, girls, non-binary, or trans. I think it's really important that we understand the demographics of these young people. The other thing I want to say about the 18 days is that when we've talked about this data before, were you to look at the average amount of time a child stays and then look at their demographic information, there's been data to suggest that our African American students, particularly our African American boys who live in poverty and have learning disabilities, spend significantly more time in our juvenile detention center than students who do not have that identity. And so I would really love to get an average for average amount of time spent incarcerated for our students who identify as African American, disabled, and receive free or reduced lunch in comparison to our white students who are incarcerated. I've heard folks say that the average white student spends less than a day or a few hours in our detention center, and that is very, very different for our Black students, and also that our Black students spend are far more likely to have more severe consequences related to being arrested. The last thing I want to say is I really appreciated that you all highlighted that when students are in Metro, they come from all across Dane County. And so if we could get the information about what percentage of the students are MMSD students and what percentage are coming from the surrounding areas and what surrounding areas, are like what the demographics coming out of those surrounding areas. So if we know that 100% of the kids we're working with in our Metro program from Verona are African American, I think we need to be aware of that, and it allows us to be mindful of our own practices in MMSD, but also how the rest of our community is informing our relationship to the work at Metro. That's it for my questions. Thank you so much for all the work that you all are doing and everything you've highlighted. I do want to thank Dr. Gothard again for highlighting the long-term commitment of our educators working with our young people, particularly you, Tina. I will move us on if there are no further questions from board members so that we can talk about our two policies.
May we have a 5-minute break, Chair?
I I feel like it's just a little bit before 7 o'clock, and I would love for us to move through these policies, Board Member
Okay.
Vandermeulen. In part
That's
because
fine.
they're coming to us for the second time. So you've seen them before. If you need to step out, I fully encourage you to do so. I'd like
That's
to turn it over to the folks who are presenting policy to us this evening.
So good.
Thank you, Chair Muldrow, again. Petra, do you want me to kick us off or do you want to kick us off? Okay. So this is just a reminder to board members, in front of you are second reads of 2 policies. On May 22nd, we presented our promotion policy and reminded the board that we are required per the state of Wisconsin and through what we know as Act 20 or Wisconsin Reads to have an updated policy that includes promotion for students that are ending 3rd grade, and that has to be approved by our Board of Education by July 1st, 2020. The second policy is also a requirement from PI in an audit we had recently to update our policy on homelessness and homelessness education to ensure that it's updated with the 2015 ESSA Act. So I just wanted to provide that context for the few board members that were not there in terms of these 2 policies, why they're coming forth, and the second. In front of you, starting with the second read of our promotion policy is 3537. I will just, I don't know if it's helpful to go through information again, or I don't want to reiterate anything that isn't needed. Are there questions after the second read and the red line that has been provided to you that would be helpful for myself or Petra to answer questions?
Board members, we are going to a vote on this policy. So if you have questions specifically to informing your vote, I encourage you to ask them. If not, I would say that we can move on to the other policy. I'm not seeing any questions at this time, Cindy Green.
The second policy, and then I'll come back to both policies before we close out. The second policy is 4406. And again, in 2015, the reauthorization of McKinney-Vento happened under ESSA, and there were both requirements of districts and also language changes. So much of what you'll see that I went over in this policy is updating old language, adding in additional requirements, and really creating a robust system that does not disrupt a student's educational programming for that particular school year, if indeed that individual had housing insecurity. We wanted to ensure that students that may be experiencing housing insecurity were able to continue to stay in a stable educational environment if they so chose when they finally secured housing. And so that is probably the other biggest update, along with some training requirements. But I will pause there, especially for board members that might not have been there for the kind of deep dive we did the other time.
Board Member Vandermeulen?
Yes, this deals with athletics and homelessness. I know under the WIAA rules, and no, it's not in the policy, but it's related. Under the WIAA rules, you can't play if you have to transfer, if you are homeless and are not in that district. How would this apply to that? Would the person still be eligible if they're allowed to remain in the district if they are houseless?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Board Member Vandermeulen. One of the things we highlighted that night is that students will not receive any issues with enrollment while they're trying to find or secure housing. We will enroll students automatically. That means access to co-curriculars, etc. And then after enrollment and getting students to be able to receive their educational services, we will work with the student and family to gather the paperwork and all the necessary requirements, but that we won't wait to receive that paperwork before we enroll students.
Thank you, I appreciate that, because I heard quite a bit.
Thank you for your question.
Board Member Sharavo and then Board President Nichols.
The question that I had is, I didn't see in here specifically, and maybe it's referenced. When you're talking about the homeless liaison and they're giving families materials, is there a reference as to acknowledging that sometimes the parents will not read the same, there may be different languages in the household, and the language that the families read may be different than what they're able to speak? Is there, because I come across that sometimes when we're doing IEPs and looking at that, like sometimes you'll participate, but then you need it written very specific. Does this ensure that that happens there too? Or is there somewhere under here that you would consider that part of the process?
Somebody answer that? You want to?
I'm gonna quickly review just to make sure that I answer your specific question.
Okay.
Just give me a sec. I mean, and while I look, I'll just say, Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, that ensuring like mutual understanding with whatever communications the home liaison is coordinating or any documents that they do, the parents and guardians, they'd be ensuring that there's like mutual understanding there. So if we need, like interpreter services or something like that, that's something that would be provided.
Correct. We would leverage our VRSs across our schools. We would leverage our interpreters if we needed to. And we would also leverage language line if that was needed. But yes, all of those. And our social workers, who are kind of the main point of contact as the homeless liaison at each school, works really closely to ensure that the communication and the information that families need is received in a way that they can understand.
Reason I'm asking is because sometimes it takes a while to do. Again, there is sometimes a distinct language that I prefer to have written as opposed to being in conversations. So I don't know if that would be something that's referenced in this space or if it's already somewhere else, I guess. That's my own, that's really why I'm asking.
I think the reason,
Okay.
well, I think that's the change to say that students are automatically enrolled into our school and that the paperwork and all of the processes that need to happen can follow afterwards so that there are no gaps in the student's educational experience. And then if it's a translation thing that we need to work on, obtaining the BRS, et cetera, that's not going to prohibit a student from accessing.
I think that's why I was looking at that, because there's a lot of student focused in here. But acknowledging that some families migrating into here from, you know, from wherever they came. I just didn't see it.
Is there a particular place where you want to reference that you think there might need change?
It just seemed like the liaison that's going to be doing that specific work might be, I'm not really sure though, because I'm not an expert at this. No, I'm not sure where that would be.
May I, as part of the policy committee, just make a suggestion, if that's okay? Chair?
That's fine with me, Nikki. Thanks for asking, but I do want to remind you that Board President Nichols is waiting to ask questions.
I just wanted to quick help out for 1 second.
Okay.
The one sense is, I know what she's getting at, and it's regarding IEP translation. And oftentimes those documents aren't translated in a timely manner so that the child isn't often put in the proper situation because the parents can't always translate it, if I am correct in making that assumption, am I?
It is good for parents to know that they will have access as they need it to, especially I think if it's in writing specifically, so if they have to reference anything back. But that is a common place where that often happens. So
I'm sorry, Board Chair Sarago, can you tell me what
Yeah.
page you're referencing?
honestly, page 2 on the very top is where it references the liaison and the roles that they do. But like I said, it's not a specific thing that's covered under the parents. I know there's a lot of stuff that talks about specific to the students. I was just looking at the things that are specific to the families and the services that the liaison would likely doing.
Yeah, I was sorry, I was just trying to understand what we needed to, what you were suggesting to add.
Make sure that the families that are being given information in regards to everything for their student, that even if they can speak in English, if they have a preferred way to receive documentation, that would be in the preferred language, because sometimes those are two different preferences.
May I make a recommendation? Under 2.9, it says parents or guardians of a homeless student are informed of the educational and related opportunities available to their children, provided with meaningful opportunities. You can just add in their
preferred language.
in their preferred written and oral language. Right there.
You think that would work, thanks? Sorry, I'm out of order.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Board President Nichols.
Thank you, Chair. Let me get my hand down. You know, for the last few years, I have been serving on our city schools, formerly known as the City Education Committee. And within this last year, we had a very robust presentation that brought city staff, county staff, and our own TEP staff in to talk about kind of the state of our housing insecure families and our homeless students. And so while I understand this policy is to fully implement the McKinney-Vento, one of the things that came up as a major gap is that McKinney-Vento does not include doubled up in their definition of homelessness. And so our TEP staff, and correct me if I'm, and I don't have the notes in front of me right now, but so our TEP staff were really great at highlighting that there are some young people who are, and their parents sometimes, who are, for lack of a better word, they're couch surfing. They're staying with one group of friends for a few nights on their couch, and then they're moving on to somewhere else, and they don't technically meet the definition, which is in 1A through H. And so I know that probably is not the purpose of this policy. The purpose of this policy, as I read it, is to make sure that we're fully implementing per McKinney-Vento. But I think what I wonder is, in the cases in which we see young people and their families experiencing a form of homelessness that's not per the definition, would we be open to including that? I don't know if I'm putting it forward as a recommendation right now, because I don't, is it in here?
Yeah.
It's,
Oh,
Leah, do you want to come?
yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Is that-
Good evening, everyone. And I want to preface this with, I think this is probably what they were referring to, and I'll
Okay.
triple check.
okay.
But the definition of McKinney-Vento includes doubled up.
Oh, it
Housing and
includes
urban
doubled up.
development, the HUD definition.
Okay,
So what our community providers and housing folks are operating under doesn't recognize being doubled up. So we do here at MMSD, and the protections of a student who is homeless in general apply, whereas the housing sector, there's a slight difference in how the law is.
And I'll
written.
just.
okay, thank you for clarifying, guys, because I know there was something that they
I remember.
did highlight something as like a gap in like either the definition or,
We redefined unaccompanied youth to create the flexibility. of
Okay.
The definition F, which is like living, in an unstable space, but also two on page 2.
yeah,
When we talked about an unaccompanied youth, we mentioned an unaccompanied youth of any age, and then the flexibility there. So that was also one of the changes that we made to try and be able to all encompassing, because we know housing insecurity doesn't always mean that you might have shelter, you might have that, you might be bouncing from place to place as well. So that was one of the changes, and I
Tell me
appreciate,
where that was
yeah.
again.
Also well, it's now number 2
Yeah,
there as well. Page 2, number 2.
oh, just, okay.
And then it's just an H, which talks about unaccompanied youth living in any circumstance described above, which the other ones. So meaning they could be couch surfing, meaning they could be,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. And then the restrictions that are outside of this policy that Leah mentioned, different, but where McKinney-Vento for us, we're trying to create every flexibility and every opportunity for students.
Okay,
I
okay,
really
great.
appreciate- Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for the correction on the doubled up. I couldn't remember if it was they are doubled up or they aren't doubled up, but I just remember that being a gap in services between the city, the county, MMSD, like there just weren't enough options for families with minor children and young people who were in these, yeah, just kind of moving from place to place and not meeting the definition of McKinney-Vento.
And
So,
that is, and that, the gaps are still real. What we're trying to do is create as much flexibility, but the gaps within the city in terms of access to
yeah,
the housing is still.
okay, thank you for that. I'll read this more thoroughly before the vote.
Thank you.
Board Vice President Pearson.
Hey y'all, sorry. Not feeling well, but can I recommend that we add in parentheses in some of the language, because like doubled up and such, just because those are some of the languages, because Nisha, I remember that conversation. And that is some of the language that our county, our city, and some of our other partners may use when trying to get resources for families. So just in a sake of possibly like connecting things, if we can, and I don't know how that leaves us, I guess, open. So then that would be a question, Petra, is like if we were to include it as a parentheses, like doubled up and maybe some of the other language, like how that leaves us, just so it's also clear so folks know. And to Martha's point, we're using common language across the system.
Yeah, I think that would fit well in definition 1, where we're defining homeless children and youth. We could look in there and find a place to put, like colloquially doubled up or something.
Okay.
Put it in F, but yeah, we can follow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hope you feel better.
Feel better?
Thanks.
I'm not seeing any other questions from my fellow board members, and I don't have any questions personally. I feel like we've been able to interrogate this policy and the revisions related to it extensively in multiple meetings at this point. If I'm missing anybody, or if anybody has questions about these two policies, please put your hand up. Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Could I second?
Yes.
And
Thank you so much for your second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. That passes unanimously. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much, team, for all your work this evening.